So here I am at Fort Frederick, Maryland, in Fort Frederick State Park. Behind me is a recreation of Fort Frederick dating from the French and Indian War. It was built through funding by the Maryland colony's governor in 1756-1757, and then it was used during the French and Indian War, during Pontiac's War. It was used to house prisoners during the War of Independence, and then thereafter it fell into disrepair. It was used a little bit to store goods and troops during the Civil War, and it fell into disrepair, and in the 1930s it was rebuilt by the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, one of the New Deal era organizations that built a lot of the nation's state parks, local parks, federal parks. A lot of the buildings and restrooms, picnic shelters, and sites were created by the CCC during that era through federal funding. This spin around here in the background, this cabin was built by the CCC during that era to serve as like the gift shop for the park. It's now a CCC museum. Fort Frederick's a great example of a fort that's very typical of that era. It was designed, these types of forts were designed by a Frenchman, Sébastien Vauban, and throughout what is now the United States you see these kinds of forts that were built in that era, both out of wood and a little less commonly out of stone, like this one. This is built out of Maryland sandstone, walls about 20-some feet high, maybe about 180 feet on each of the square sides, and then there are these corner triangular bastions that stick out, and the angles that these are created at allowed for nobody to be able to sneak up on the fort and have firing lines in every direction, so the enemy would have no place to hide. This fort design, I mean, is another part of that Enlightenment era that gave birth to new political thought, changes in the way that we looked at science, nature, and engineering. So it's very much a Enlightenment era piece of military engineering. Let's kind of sneak inside here for 1 second. You get a sense of the size of the interior parade grounds and these two barracks and storehouses on either side. The walls would have undoubtedly in that era had firing steps, and there's a thought that at one of the corners there was an underground powder magazine. You see one cannon back there. So while most of the forts throughout Pennsylvania along the Forbes Road were built out of logs, whether that be Fort Bedford, Fort Ligonier, even all the way to the forks of the Ohio at present-day Pittsburgh, where Fort Duquesne and then Fort Pitt were built, all in the same kind of design, but all of a very different material.